YouTube is telling me that I am live. So would somebody just do me a favor? Just type me a little message so I know that you can hear me, because audio is my enemy as far as YouTube is concerned. And my husband is at work and therefore cannot listen in and tell me whether you can hear me. So please, somebody. Ashley. Hi, Ashley. How are you doing? Thank you very much. I recognize the name. Thanks for joining today. I hope the course is going well for you, Ashley. I spotted you signed up to the Amazon Interview Wiz Academy, so thank you very much for doing that, and I hope you're enjoying the content. Everybody else who's here, please just ping, say hello. I'd love to know where everybody is coming in from. It's actually cool. It's a Labor Day here in Europe, but makes no difference to me. You guys are still obviously prepping for your Amazon interviews, and if you're still prepping for your interviews, then I am still going to be here to help you. So let's wait a few minutes and see if other people arrive. It usually takes people a little bit of time, 5 or 10 minutes to arrive once the notice goes up on YouTube. So in the meantime, Ashley, where are you coming to us from? Oh, we've lost a couple of people. They got bored of me already. Gosh, that's impressive. I can bore people in 2 minutes flat. Yay, achievement. Oh, I'm glad you're loving the content, Ashley. Oh, I'm so pleased. I'm so delighted. And you've got your interview on Wednesday, so fingers crossed, only 2 days. Philadelphia. I don't think I've had anybody come from Philadelphia yet, so that's really exciting. I love knowing where everyone's come from and seeing how far I reach out. I got to Japan not so long ago. One of my academy students from Japan managed to land herself a role in Amazon Studios in Japan. I was like, wow, Japan. Okay, who else have we got then? Good morning, Tracy Lynn from NJ, New Jersey, I'm assuming. Vibav, hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Christina, you are very welcome. Thank you for saying you love my content. I appreciate that very much. F-K, welcome back. Hi, good to see you again. Delighted to see you. Okay. Christina from Washington, D.C. Oh, Tracy, you've got your final loop tomorrow. Fingers crossed for you. Okay. Kevin KP Powers. Oh, you've got your final interview for Military Pathways. I am such a massive fan of the Military Pathways program. I don't know if any of you follow me on LinkedIn, but I'm always reposting their jobs. They are such great people. The recruiters are fantastic, and I think it's an amazing program. So, Kevin, honestly, I have my fingers hugely crossed for you. Tracy Lynn, also in New Jersey. I'm popular in New Jersey. I wonder why. My brother used to live there, but that was a while ago now. Okay. Rachel Norris from Germany. Guten Tag. I hope you're well. John Cow, you've got your final loop in 3 hours. Okay, so get in those last minute questions. Awesome. Okay, where else have we got? Oh, Tracy, you're welcome. Thank you. Christina, you're at panel in 10 days. Oh, you've got quite a lot of time then, Christina, so make good use of that time. I'm sure you are. F-K, apprenticeship assessment. Another great program, actually. I love the idea of apprenticeships. I'm hoping my son will take an apprenticeship rather than needing me to pay for him to go to university. I can't afford that. Okay. Oh, John, you've been rejected twice and this is your third time. Third time lucky, fingers crossed. Okay, welcome everybody. What I will probably do is as people arrive and pop up, I will welcome them because it's always nice to be welcomed. But what I'll do is I'll get going now. I'm not expecting a lot of people because the majority of Europe are on a bank holiday / Labor Day. So we'll just get going anyway because there's lots of you who are not in Europe and obviously some that are. I don't know if it's a Labor Day in Germany. You have all sorts of different kind of bank holidays in Germany, depending on the different, they're not states, are they? But I know the different areas have different holidays. So maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Okay, so let me introduce yourself. I know a bunch of you obviously know me because you are candidates for my academy, but for those that don't or haven't been here before, I am Gigi, and I have rebranded myself the Amazon Interview Whiz. Here's a little picture of me that I did. I love this. I show this to everybody because I'm so proud. I actually created this entire thing and all of the animation in the Amazon Interview Whiz Academy. I taught myself all of it through YouTube. Love YouTube. So now I'm very proud and I have to show everyone. My hair's a bit longer now than it was. Okay, so I interviewed and bar raised across 5 years in Amazon. I bar raised in tech and non-tech roles, and I have literally hired hundreds of Amazonians. I know exactly what it takes to get hired at Amazon. Since leaving Amazon, I've created my own Amazon interview preparation program, if you like, by creating a whole bunch of e-videos and content that I offer through the Amazon Interview Whiz Academy at about 90% less of the cost it would take you to get exactly the same information from an Amazon interview coach. Basically, whilst I was bar raising at Amazon, I could see that some people were getting coached, and then I discovered that that's literally thousands of US dollars worth of investment they were having to make. And I knew there was a way of making it more affordable, and I thought everybody deserved to have affordable content, which is why I have my YouTube channel, which is why I do these sessions, and why I went to 700 hours worth of effort to create the Amazon Interview Whiz Academy. So the way these sessions work, a little bit of housekeeping. I'm not going to answer any technical questions. There are about 250 job families, probably more by now, in Amazon, and no one person can be a technical expert in all of those. I am an expert in the Amazon interview process, in interview strategy, and of course in the leadership principles. That was my job as a bar raiser, to be able to see through any context, whether I was bar raising and interviewing someone who was in finance or vendor management or software development or solutions architect or program manager in robotics, you name it. My job was to see through the context and be able to recognize and assess the caliber of the leadership principles. So that's what I'm going to offer for you today. Second thing is, I will try and pick questions that are useful for everybody. People do often have very specific questions. I want to make sure your time and my time is well spent. So I will try and pick ones that are useful for everybody. Although on occasion, people ask really interesting, unique ones that I just can't resist. And then the final thing is, please just don't ask me for random tips. I'm applying for a program manager role. Any tips? I have like 2.5 hours worth of general tips on my YouTube channel. So if you're just looking for kind of broad brush, anything and everything you might need to know, definitely the YouTube channel is a place to start. Okay, now I've done that, we will get going. So the way this works is, you ask me questions in the little chat box here on the right. I'll scroll through, pick questions that I think are useful, and try and respond. Sometimes I'll skip them for the reasons that I said earlier. If I do skip your question, please don't be offended. You can always go to my YouTube channel, find the appropriate video, and just put a question there in YouTube. I almost always answer YouTube or any question from anybody within about 48 hours. I have a few that I'm running behind on YouTube at the moment. So if you're one of those people, I'm sorry, I will get to you. All right, let's get going. Okay. So, oh, F.K, I missed that. You got your job. You got the apprenticeship job. Oh, F.K. Bring it on, man. Great job. Congratulations. Very, very pleased for you. And you are absolutely welcome for the advice. Right, let's get going. Okay. Hi, Askari from Pakistan. Welcome. Delighted to have you here. Let's have a look then. Oh, Christina, thank you. I love you too. I love all of you, even though I've never met you and never will. I really feel passionately about what I do. So thank you, Christina. I'm really glad you found the information easy to understand. Okay. Christina, oh, sorry, next question from Christina. Do I offer one-to-one interview preparation? Not this month, Christina. I am taking a bit of a break from my mock interview processes for this month. So I'm sorry, but if you do want a recommendation, ping me on LinkedIn and I will send you a recommendation for another Amazon interview coach who I think is great and I know she'll help you. Okay, so let's get going then. Great first question, Tracy Lynn. I'm going to pin this. This is a good one to start off with. Oh, I'm very thirsty today. Hang on a second. Okay, so Tracy Lynn has been asked to submit her writing sample today before her final virtual interview. Good, I'm glad you're getting it in today. The process is working. How does the writing assessment weigh in the interview process? So I've been asked this question so frequently recently that I am going to do a YouTube video about it, but simply haven't got round to it. So here's your answer, Tracy Lynn. There's no mathematical equation associated with your writing sample and your interviews. The purpose of the writing sample is to effectively prove you can string a sentence together. So almost all decisions made in Amazon are made via a document. Someone has a decision they want made, and they have to write a document about it, usually a 2-pager. If it's a really complex thing, 6 pages. You spend a long time writing that document, perfecting that document, and then you take it into a meeting. The first 30 minutes of that meeting, assuming it's an hour, is spent in complete silence. It's very weird when you do it for the first time, I have to say, in complete silence, and everybody reads the document that you've written and they get their little pens out and they scribble on it and they ask questions or write down questions. The next 30 minutes is spent then discussing the document. So being able to write a very clear, precise, concise, specific document with a very clear and strong narrative in it, full of compelling arguments and data, is critical to the success of Amazon. If you are applying for an L6 role or above, L6s are generally roles that are called senior something manager, something along those lines, then you will be asked to do a writing sample because you're probably going to be leading lots of meetings and trying to get lots of decisions being made. People who are slightly more junior, for example, L5s, if they're in the type of role that is generally a role that just requires documents to be written, for example, product managers or legal people, you might be asked to do a written sample there as well as a slightly more junior role. The people that really will look at the writing sample are the hiring manager and the bar raiser. The process requires the hiring manager and the bar raiser to read your writing sample. And they are reading it purely for the purpose of feeling confident that if they brought you into the business, you would be able to write a document. Now, the truth is, no matter how good a writer somebody is, when they come into Amazon, there is still work to be done to improve their document writing. Amazon just has quite specific ways of writing, and you just don't know those until you arrive in the business. So it's very rarely that a written sample, unless it's really bad, would be a knockout reason for a candidate. If you've got a strong interview and you've got a document in terms of how well it's constructed, the narrative flow, the specificity, etc., you'll be fine. If you've got an average interview and a stellar document, it won't save you. If you have an average interview and an average document, that's not going to happen either. So there's no mathematical weighting that says you've got these many points. It's not like school where your teacher marks your essay and you get this many points for grammar and this for spelling and this for punctuation and this for phraseology. It doesn't work that way. The bar raiser and the hiring manager are looking at that document and saying, can this person write? When they join our business, will they at least come from a relatively strong position and only need to optimize themselves when it comes to writing documents? So I would say to you, don't over labor that document, okay? Don't overdo it. You need to spend far more time planning your answers for your leadership principles, your STARry model, your mock interviews. Invest your time there. Write yourself a clear, concise, coherent writing sample. Go to my YouTube channel. I have a video there about how to write the writing sample well. Get it done, but focus your energies elsewhere. Doesn't mean to say do a shoddy job. Don't do a shoddy job. But nobody really ever who had an amazing interview got rejected because they had an average written sample. Okay, thank you for asking that question, Tracy Lynn. That is a popular one these days. Okay, moving on then. Okay, John, let's have a look at this question. So the hiring manager interviewed you last time. So this is your rejection and then your second rejection and into your third meeting. Said you passed the bar, so he said he just wanted to chat about the fit. I'm a bit confused, John. The hiring manager interviewed you last time, said you'd passed the bar, so said he wanted to have a chat about the fit. No behaviour questions. What do I do to prepare for that? So, John, I'm just scrolling back up to try and get the context. So you've had your loop. You've been considered raising the bar. And now the hiring manager wants to talk to you about the fit for the role. What do I suppose to prepare for that? Well, it's pretty unusual. Usually, if you're raising the bar, you're in. So it's quite hard to tell you what to prepare because this is a little bit outside process. You're all ready for your behavior questions. So if he asks you something, then you'll be in a position to answer that. I guess the conversation at the debrief must have been about the fact that overall you're raising the bar on the leadership principles, but there might be just some question marks about how strong you are in some of the key leadership principles. So if he's talking to you now, he's probably going to want to try and understand how you might fit in the role if the examples that you gave in the debrief weren't quite showing strength in the leadership principles. So go back to the job description, John. I think that's the only and the best advice that I can give you, because if it's a question of fit for the role, everything that is required to fit the role is going to be in that job description. So I guess I would be prepared, if I was in your situation, to talk about the skills described in the job description and the type of work described in the job description so that I could convince that hiring manager that I was capable of those things. I guess they may or may not want to dive into the STARry examples, but just be prepared. Go through that job description line by line and think about how John knows how to do this, or examples that you could just quickly talk about when it comes to the particular skills, etc., that they're looking for. So good luck. I'm very curious to see how that turns out for you, John. So please come back and let us know. Okay, so. Oh, Jenna, I'm just going to post Jenna's message here in case anyone hasn't seen it. So, Jenna, after your loop last week, you got an offer. That is amazing. And you're pushing on the comp. Good woman. I do generally think that one should try and get the compensation that one needs. So you're sweating if you're waiting for a response. Don't sweat, Jenna. You have done the hard work. I can't tell you how hard it is to find someone that, as a hiring manager, and I was a hiring manager for many years, hiring at quite senior levels and very junior levels as well. I had a very broad team. How exciting it is when you find somebody you want. The shoe is now on the other foot, Jenna. You can relax because now they want you, and they do not want to have to go through this whole process again for the sake of a couple of $1,000, pounds, euro, yen, whatever the currency might be in your area. I think, did you say you're in Germany? No, maybe someone else. Anyway, so chill, man. You've done the hard work. Get the best that you can out of the deal. I suggest to people that if you are going to push, that you try and push on the share part of the compensation, because they're always much more willing to be flexible on that than they are on base salary. So good luck, but congratulations, amazing achievement. Thank you for letting me know. It made me happy. Okay, let's keep going. Oh, big jump. Davi, okay, I'm gonna pin this. This is super frustrating. I do feel for you on this one. So you've been stuck since last week. You've sent your availabilities for phone interview, but you haven't heard back from both recruiters despite sending follow-ups. What can you do? I think the answer is, Davi, not much. It's kind of beyond your hands now. If you've sent your availability and you've done your follow-ups and you've still not heard back, then I'm afraid you're just going to have to relax and wait to see what happens. It could be any number of reasons why this is the situation you found yourself in. They may be on holiday, vacation, sorry. They might be distracted by other roles. Sometimes, certainly in my experience as a hiring manager, my recruiters would get very, very focused on other roles that they were hiring for, and mine would kind of fall by the wayside, and I would have to give them a poke to remind them that I was still there. Or, this is worst case scenario, Davi, the role actually might have been filled already, and they just haven't had the time to go through all of the candidates who are still in the pipeline and let them know that the role has been filled. That's not any more likely than any of the other scenarios I played out, but those are the possible scenarios. So I would, Davi, just say give it a few more days and then send another reminder, and that's about all you can do, really. It must be so frustrating. I really do feel for you. But thank you for the question. I'm sure you're not the only person that ever found themselves in that situation. Okay, so I'm just going to unpin that. Okay, so Navin, you're asking me about salary negotiation. So I'm not going to go too far into this subject because actually it's not my specialist area. I'm not a recruiter. I've never been a recruiter. I've been a hiring manager discussing salary with my recruiters for my hires, but I'm not a recruiter, and salary negotiation is not something that I was doing every day. I'm just going to cover off this question from you, Navin. So Navin is asking, how much room is there available for negotiation? There is no single thing response that I can give you to that. It's all going to be dependent on the salary range for the role that you have applied for, where you presented yourself in that range when you originally had the conversation about compensation with your recruiter. Quite frankly, how much they want you is the other variable that's going to matter. How desperate are they to hire you, and therefore how far are they going to go to squeeze further up the salary ranges in order to land you. So there's no real number. I think you just have to take a sensible approach, which is, practically speaking, what do you need? What do you need to live on? What do you need to pay your bills? What's going to make you feel like you are getting a reasonable remuneration for your daily efforts? And once you know what that number looks like, then that's got to be the right number. Very rarely have I ever seen an offer withdrawn from candidates because they've been pushing too hard on salary. But there have been times where certainly my recruiters come back to me and said they're pushing for more and I absolutely can't go any further. I have to stay here. And I've said to them, fine, that's fine. Because the reality is, if you want to work at Amazon, they don't want to have to beg you. And if $1,000, $2,000 is going to make the difference whether you're going to work there or not, they're going to wonder whether actually you really want to work there. So you just have to make a sensible judgment between how much you want the job and how much you're willing to push. Okay, I hope that was helpful. I know it wasn't exactly the answer you were looking for, but no one could have given you that answer, I'm afraid. Okay. Okay. Sorry, scrolling on. Okay, Rachel. Welcome, Rachel. Don't think I recognize your name. So welcome if this is your first time. And if it's not your first time, I apologize for not recognizing your name. So you're going through an Excel test. Is this done in every Amazon interview process? And if so, how detailed are the questions? And is it enough to know the basics? So no, it's not done in every single Amazon interview. So different job families have different requirements when it comes to the actual interview process. There's a lot in common, the leadership principle questions, the going from step to step, but there are also a bunch of technical tests that are unique to different roles. So devs will obviously be asked to do coding. Some people will be asked to do Excel, finance, and it sounds like media sales manager. Other people will not. Other people will be asked to do more general kind of skills, knowledge tests, etc. So I can't tell you exactly what the questions are going to be like, I'm afraid, Rachel, because it's going to vary massively between the different groups. Because you're doing a media sales manager role, I would anticipate that the basic skills of Excel would be adequate. You're not a finance manager, so advanced Excel, I would suggest, is probably not something you're going to have to work with, but I would expect that you would have to be able to prove that you can do embedded formulas, kind of VLOOKUPs, etc., etc. So it's not going to be the end of the world, I don't think, if you're not the most stellar person when it comes to Excel, but they're going to have a bar that they need you to pass. And once you've passed it, you'll be fine. It doesn't matter whether you're kind of assuming the pass mark is 50%. I made that one up. I don't know what it is. I don't think it's going to make a huge amount of difference whether you hit 55% or you hit 85%. You just have to prove that you have the basic competent skills. Okay, I hope that was helpful. Just gonna unpin that. Christina, how to find out what job title corresponds to certain level jobs? That's almost impossible, actually, Christina, because what does often happen is the job title that they advertise the role under isn't the same job title as they use internally. Amazon job titles internally are very functional, I suppose. You might have a principal PM3, or you might have a marketing manager 2, product marketing manager 1, senior product market, different job titles internally, and they often don't make sense externally when you're trying to explain to a candidate what type of job they're looking at going into. So it's pretty hard to give you anything definitive. At its simplest level, usually anything that's just something manager is a relatively junior role, a 4 or a 5. Something that is a senior something manager will tend to be a L6 level role. And then anything that is a principal or a senior manager will be an L7, and then you're up to directors, etc. Now, that obviously works in the majority of kind of core business roles, but there are other roles where that just model doesn't apply at all. So I do say to candidates that you shouldn't really worry too much about the level of the role that you're applying for. What you really need to make sure is that the scope and complexity of the role is what you want for your next step and your next job, and that the salary, the compensation, is what you want. And as long as you've got the scope and complexity in your daily work to keep you happy and challenged and stimulated, and as long as you've got the salary that makes you feel appreciated and well remunerated for your efforts, then that should be it. Whether it's a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever, really shouldn't make too much of a difference. They're just numbers at the end of the day. Okay, so I hope that was helpful, Christina. I'm going to move on. Okay. Yeah, John, sorry, I've just got to your comment there. So you got rejected for the other role, but they think you're a better fit for this role. So he's going to be exploring this other role and the skills required for this other role. So make sure you get hold of this other role's job description if you possibly can. Okay. Woo, big jump, big jump. Saruv, hello, welcome. Nice to see you back. Thank you for rejoining us. Oh, Jenna, thank you. You couldn't have done it without me. Thank you. Makes me feel warm and fuzzy. Okay. Yeah, Christina's just talking about the key LPs. So Christina's just saying that she messaged the recruiter asking for the key leadership principles and I haven't heard back yet. So this is just kind of a general bit of advice that I do give, and you might have seen it on my YouTube channel. It's really, really important that you are considered to be strong in the key leadership principles for the role. And I do suggest that you might reach out to your recruiter and ask your recruiter what the key leadership principles are and see if they will help you. Some recruiters do, some recruiters don't. I can't tell you why they would or why they wouldn't, but certainly what happens, and I hear very clearly from candidates, plenty of them get them, plenty of them don't. So my suggestion is just ask, be polite. If they say no, they say no, but you've lost nothing by asking. The other thing that I say to people is go through your job descriptions line by line by line by line and identify the words that you think are indicative of a leadership principle. So, you know, risk. If you ever see the word risk, it means bias for action. Now, obviously, you need to understand the leadership principles really, really well in order to be able to identify that. And of course, my leadership principle masterclasses can help you do that. But that is another way of identifying the key leadership principles. And basically, I do it myself when I'm preparing for my one-to-one mock interviews. I go through the job description, pick out the leadership principles. The one I see said most times is basically my top priority. Then the next one I see referenced second amount of times is my next priority, etc., etc. Third thing you can do is be a little bit cheeky and see if you can find anyone on LinkedIn with the same job title. And then you might perhaps just reach out to them and say you're preparing for interview. Would they give you any type of tips in terms of what's really important in their job role? Now, I think the odds of getting a good response off that are pretty slim. You won't know these people. It'll be a random outreach, and most people aren't that hot on random outreaches asking for that level of favor. But again, what have you got to lose? Not a lot. What have you got to gain? A lot. So, Christina, if you haven't heard back from your recruiter, yeah, they might just be busy. So do the other two things if I were you, and then hopefully by the time that's complete, you'll hear back from your recruiter. They may say no. If they do, don't worry about it. No one's going to hold it against you that you ever asked. Okay, moving on then. Okay, so I'm going to answer this question for Ashley because this should be a question that the majority of people actually find themselves facing regardless of what role they are going for, because it is a very popular leadership principle when it comes to interviews. So Ashley is asking me, what's the best way to approach the question, tell me about a time you failed? Well, the best way to approach it is to tell them about a time you failed. And I know that sounds a bit flippant, so I apologize for that. But the reason someone in Amazon is asking you that question is because I guarantee you, when you're at Amazon, you will fail. You will mess up at some point. Everybody does, and they know it, and they expect it. So they ask that question because they want to understand what situations you found yourself in the past where you failed and how you got into that situation in the first place. But far more importantly, what they're interested in is how you got out of that situation and how you dealt with having failed, both practically in terms of what you actually did to repair the damage, and also emotionally, like what type of a person are you when something like that happens? Do you crawl up into a little ball and start shaking? Or do you stand up, dust yourself off, like say, yeah, my bad, people, and get on with it? So tell them about a time when you failed, and then tell them how you responded to that failure, how you recovered from it, what you learned from it, and most importantly, the cherry on the icing is how you have then since gone on and used that learning to get better outcomes in the future. The very, very best kind of improvements, if we all think about my STARI model, The very best improvements that you hear about as an interviewer is where people can tell you that they learned something, but not just stop there. Then go on to say, having learnt that thing, here I was 2 months later in a different scenario, and I applied that learning and managed to increase my performance by X. I don't know what that looks like, but the extra part of the improvement is to be able to show how you have applied that learning for better outcomes later. Don't be afraid of that question, guys. Honestly, it's actually a golden question, because if you can show that you fail, of course you fail, that won't be a surprise to your interviewer, but having failed, how incredibly you recover from it, both commercially, with your colleagues and your relationships with your colleagues, with your customers and your relationships with your customers, with your skills and how your skills have improved, and then how you have then leveraged those learnings. Those are fantastic questions if you can get them right. So come on. Think of yourself as smashing failure, Ashley. The more catastrophic, the better, quite frankly, because they make better stories, as long as you've got a really amazing recovery. Good luck. Okay. Let's keep going. Ayatha, hola. Hola, welcome back. Good to see you again. Okay, let's have a look. Oh, Ayatha, thank you. I'm just going to pin this. So you've got your phone screen. Your phone screen on Friday was good. You've got a next phone screen tomorrow. Fingers crossed. And oh, you spotted my post on LinkedIn about donations towards India. So I'm going to just use this opportunity. If you guys are even thinking about signing up to the Amazon Interview Wiz Academy, I'm going to be donating 25% of all of my profits this week to the Disaster Emergency Committee for redistribution to charities in India. So if you're kind of thinking about it and you're umming and ahhing and you're thinking about putting it off, if you do decide to make a purchase this week, 25% of that profit's going to go there. Just thought I'd say that. Okay, going to move on then. Okay. Okay. Suchit Gupta, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. So I can't, okay, so you're asking me, you've got a senior manager supply development call this week. What band do I think it will be, and what do I suggest to keep your best foot forward? So senior manager role is an L7. And what do I suggest you do to get your best foot forward? Watch my YouTube channel. Like literally every question anyone has ever asked me has found its way somehow as a video into the YouTube channel. So go have a look at that, and that will give you a whole bunch of guidance that will be very useful to you. Okay, so I'm going to move on. Okay. Jenna's just given us a really good tip. I like that one, Jenna. So I always recommend when people ask me what questions they should be asking in interview, my absolute favorite question to ask of the hiring manager is what their favorite leadership principle is, because I think that tells you a huge amount about the hiring manager themselves and what it might be like to work for them. I also tend to ask the same question of the other direct reports of the hiring manager, because you'd be amazed at the type of consistency that you can get within a team, and also sometimes the type of diversity. So it's really useful to kind of understand what the general map is, if you like, of the leadership principles that are the favorites, because it tells you a lot about the people that you're going to work with. And Jenna was just saying that she asked her hiring manager, and then they very kindly told you the key leadership principles for the role, which is awesome. I mean, it's not something usually a hiring manager would talk about, but Jenna, you smart lady, you did some kind of psychology stuff there and managed to get some critical information. So well done. Good on you. Okay, so we're a little bit light on questions today, actually, and actually we're quite light on people. I think half of Europe are obviously chilling out, understandably so. So I'm just going to have a quick scroll back up to see if there's anything I've missed. I don't think there is. Scrolling, 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 scrolling. Okay. All right, David, thank you for that question. Let me just stick that one up for you. So, sorry, I was just reading Jenna's comment that her degree is in psychology. Very good. You obviously studied well, Jenna. All right, David, you were rejected for your original role, but your recruiter is setting up a video call with the hiring manager for a different role, okay? And do I think this will be an interview similar to the others or different? So I would say, I spotted your question, Ashley. Yes, I'll come back to it. I would say prepare for it to be pretty much the same as the others. You kind of can't help it when you are an Amazonian. When you're talking to a candidate, you kind of naturally default into the leadership principle questions because they're really the way you're taught to understand whether someone is a fit for a role or not. That said, there are plenty of hiring managers that will also just go to your CV, resume, sorry, British CV here, will go to your resume and just ask you to chat through that. So in that you're already prepped for your leadership principle, behavioral questions for your loop, you're good to go with that. As I made the recommendation earlier, I definitely think it's worth, you must get hold of the job description of the new role, have a look at that and go through it and map what it is about your skills and your experience that you would want to highlight to this new hiring manager if you got the chance. And if you can have those two things covered off, you've got your leadership principle stuff prepped already, but this other job description and some key highlights from your skills and your experience that you think you can talk to that match that job description, you should have your bases covered. Okay, moving on. Ashley, right, yes, right. So let me just pin. This is a bit unusual, Ashley. There's not many roles that ask people to do this. So I'm going to do this one now. I did skip it earlier because it is specific, but seeing as we have time. So you have to make a presentation where you teach something for 5 to 10 minutes. Do I have any advice on how to approach this? Presentations aren't big in Amazon, so this is why this is a little bit unusual. But I think I would give you the same advice that I give on my written sample video, which is all about being really economic with language, very specific when it comes to data. I personally wouldn't suggest doing anything overly kind of fancy and creative. It does depend on what role you're applying for. But generally, Amazonians are much more interested in the information and how you dress it up in terms of pretty pictures and colors and charts and graphs, unless they are really necessary and you really need a graph to show a data point rather than just showing the data point in a written piece of text, then don't overcomplicate it. You're trying to explain something to somebody, so just keep it simple and to the point and don't over embellish. I think that would be my best advice for you, Ashley. Okay, so gonna move on. See what else we've got. All right, Christina. So what's the best way to impress your interview panel and stand out during the interview process? There's only one way, I'm afraid, Christina, and that's just to have amazing examples from your career history. Those are really the things that impress people. You know, you can be incredibly articulate, you can be incredibly energetic, you can have a really well structured example in terms of the STARI, you can be really economic with your language, you can be really specific with your data points, you can have lots of data points. All of those things are good, but the truth is, if you don't have really impressive examples from your career history, it's all just dressing. So there's no one thing that you can do other than have had an amazing 10-year career behind you, which you can't do anything about now. That happened or it didn't happen. So don't seek for one thing, Christina. Know the leadership principles, know them inside out, back to front, upside down. Have your best possible examples prepared to answer those leadership principles. Practice, practice, practice reshaping those questions, those examples for different questions, because that's actually the ultimate skill in interviewing, which is if somebody can ask you 10 different questions and you can use 1 or 2 examples and reshape them every single time to be able to fit it into those questions, that's the key skill. So those are the things really that you need to focus on. There's no kind of magic fairy dust that I can tell you that will make you stand out above anybody else. People stand out for different reasons. Okie dokie. So moving on. Right, so I'm just going to read Rachel's question here. Okay. Good question, Rachel. Good question. Okay, so what is the best way to behave / answer a question that I really don't know? For example, could you mention a KPI that you have introduced if I've not yet introduced a KPI? What can I answer? Okay, so this is a really good question, Ashley. My advice to people is if you don't have a good example, don't blag it, because it won't pass off very well. So if you're asked a question and you really don't feel you have a very good example for it, but maybe you have an example that kind of sounds right, but not quite, at 10,000 feet, and this is the only time I ever advocate for 1 minute examples, but in the space of 1 minute, just explain to your interviewer what this example is. I know this isn't quite right, Mr. / Mrs. Interviewer, but I'm thinking about using this example. This is broadly what it is. Is that going to work for you? They might say yes, because it might be good enough, but they might say no, because the slight deviation of where you think it's not quite the right thing might actually be the really, really important point that they're trying to get to. So at that point, they might say, no, that example is not going to work for me. Then I would say to you, you should say to them, I'm really sorry, but I don't feel I have a good example for this question. I don't want to waste your time or my opportunity trying to shoehorn something in. So can I please have another question? I've heard on other YouTube channels, people, coaches saying you should never ask for another question. I can tell you that is not correct. In my bar raising experience as a bar raiser, training other bar raisers, doing many, many interviews, you absolutely can ask for another question. Don't do it too often is the only thing. You can definitely get away with it once on a phone screen. You can get away with it once, maybe twice on a whole kind of loop / panel, but more than that, and then they're going to start getting worried that you actually don't have a very good bank of examples behind you. But I would definitely not start making something up if you don't have a good example, because that just, they would much prefer you just said, I actually don't have a good example, than if you gave them a really, really weak example that clearly you had to make up on the fly. Okay, I hope that was helpful then. Okay, so moving on. Okay, Ayatha, what could the LP behind disagreement with team members be? It's earns trust. It earns trust. So quite often people get the earns trust and the have backbone disagree and commit leadership principles kind of a bit mixed up. And generally that's okay if you pick the wrong one. There's always evidence of earns trust in backbone, and there's quite often evidence of backbone in earns trust, but not as much as the other way around. But if it's something around a time where you, I don't know, tell me about a time where you had a disagreement with a team member. What was the disagreement about and how did you deal with it? That's going to be more along the lines of earns trust. If you have a question that says, tell me about a time where you had a particular point of view of something and everybody else in the room disagreed with you, how did you deal with it? That's have backbone, disagree, and commit. So generally, if they're talking about a time where you have a difficult relationship with an individual, it's kind of along the earns trust. If they're talking about a particular scenario where you wanted to do one thing and everybody else wanted to do something else, that's usually a have backbone, disagree, and commit. Okay, moving on then. What have we got? We've got 10 more minutes left. Okay. Okay, Soham, I think, apologies if I've mispronounced your name there. So, will the questions based on leadership principles be very explicit, or are you supposed to identify which LPs they're actually interested in based on the question? Yes, the latter part. So they're not going to say to you, right, I'm going to ask you about earned trust, seeing as I just used earned trust example. What you really need to do is have studied the leadership principles and really understand the nuances. For example, as I just described, the difference between earned trust and have backbone, disagree, and commit. And then as the question is being asked of you, you will have prepared examples that could more or less relate to that question. And the reason why I say that is the questions only exist to try and come up with a way of drawing from you an example that reflects the leadership principles. They don't actually want the answer to that question. Obviously they do, but it's not the specifics of that question that matters. What matters is the evidence of the behaviors of the leadership principles that they will be able to draw out from you if you answer that question. So if you prepare examples for the leadership principles based on the definitions of the leadership principles and the different facets associated with the leadership principles and the different behaviors within those leadership principles and facets, probability is you will have an example that could be made to fit any of the 127 questions on the Amazon interview question bank. So if I was to ask you about a time when you had a particular point of view and nobody else in the room agreed with you, how did you deal with it? If you said to me, well, I don't have an example where everybody else in the room disagreed with me, but I do have an example where a key decision maker disagreed with me. Could I use that? Likelihood is your interviewer will say, yep, I'll take that one, please, because they both talk about have backbone, disagree, and commit. One is a big group of people and one is an individual. Makes no difference to the actual interview data that they'll gather in terms of have backbone, disagree, and commit if it's one person or multiple people. So really what you want to be doing is understand the leadership principles, build out your bank of examples, a couple of examples that could be used for a leadership principle, so that when a question comes along, you can think about, oh, I kind of have an example that could meet that. Okay. And then you can start talking about it. You don't have to, as many people I'm discovering seem to, do research online to gather all 127 questions that are in the interview question bank and come up with an answer for every single one of those. If you try and do that, you will blow your mind. You just need a core set of examples for a leadership principle and practice reshaping them when different types of questions come your way. Okay. So, going to unpin that. Ashley, you're struggling with really understanding what leadership principle is behind each question as well. I feel like some questions can cover many things. It's true. Some questions can cover many things. And that's almost the point of the examples and the interview process. I might be talking to you, let's stick with the thread of have backbone, leadership, disagree, and commit. But you may start giving me some data. Sorry, I've lost my slipper. You might start giving me data about ownership or bias for action. I'll take that. Just because I wasn't particularly looking for that piece of data, it doesn't mean that it's not data that I'm interested in. So as you give your example about have backbone, disagree, and commit, if you start talking about ownership, I'm typing it down, I'm recording it. And when I get to debrief and I start talking to everybody else on the panel, I might say, I wasn't looking for evidence on ownership, but Ashley really demonstrated some incredible behaviors in terms of ownership. And then the other person who was specifically asking you about ownership will say, yes, Ashley did really well on my example for ownership as well. And the two of us will say, wow, that means Ashley's actually pretty awesome at ownership, because if she's asked about it and she gets good evidence, and even when she's not asked about it, she gets good evidence. Tick, tick, Ashley's strength on ownership. So yes, questions very often cover multiple things, because in your professional career, any action that you take is never ever just going to be one thing. It's always going to be multifaceted. So it is true that you will find a question covers multiple things. Again, I think, Ashley, the situation needs to be, as you kind of think about the leadership principles and come up with examples for the leadership principles. And if the question that you're asked so happens to actually fit quite well with an example that you created, it doesn't matter what leadership principle you created for, but you go in your head, oh, actually that fits quite well with this example that I made up, use that example. I always try and say to people, answer the question if you can. Don't try and second guess the leadership principle. Planning for the leadership principle gets you a bank of examples. The bank of examples should be possible to fit most of the 127 questions. It's the examples sit here, the leadership principles here, the questions sit here, and you're not really having to give your answer from the leadership principle. You're supposed to be answering the question, and to do that, you prepare for examples via the leadership principles. I definitely have to come up with some kind of a graphic representation of those relationships, because it's quite an obtuse concept to get your head around. Focus on the questions when you're asked it. Focus on the leadership principles in your preparation. Okay, I think I blew a few people's minds there because I lost a couple on the way. So I'm sorry if that wasn't as clear as it could be, Ashley. Okay, so we have 3 minutes left. So let's do this last question from Christina, and then I think we will wrap it up. So also a very common question, Christina, is it acceptable to use the same answer for more than one leadership principle? For instance, I can say, as I explained in my previous example, so my advice is try and avoid it if you can, using the same example multiple times. The reason being that once that evidence is in, that evidence is in. You can't really cash the same chip twice. Equally, the more range of impressive examples you can have, the more range of impressive examples that you can have in your career history, the more the team in Amazon are going to feel really, really confident that you are going to be able to deliver amazing stuff time and time and time and time again. If you only have a small group of examples that you pull out repeatedly for different questions, they're going to be thinking, oh, Christina's had a couple of really good events in her career history, but it looks like a little bit of a limited range. She might be a little bit of a one-trick pony. We want people that can consistently show us time and time and time and time and time and time again that they are high performers, which is why I try to say to people, please avoid giving the same example repeatedly if you can. Now, the if you can is the important bit, because you're going to be asked so many questions in the Amazon interview process that probability is that you will run out of unique examples. So if you have to, so if you can't do fresh ones and you have to do a repeat, what I tell people is try and use it for a very different leadership principle question. So if you used it for earns trust already, then don't use it for another earns trust question. Try and use it for an ownership question. So something went catastrophically wrong with a customer. You can maybe explain how you earn the trust back from the customer. The next time you use it, something went catastrophically wrong for a customer. It wasn't your scope particularly, but you saw that it went wrong. You saw that nobody else was around. This person was on holiday, whatever. You took ownership of it, and this was how you owned the situation and solved it. So you reshape it for different leadership principles. I have a very specific demonstration of how that can be done in my Amazon interview with preparation masterclass. If you happen to have that masterclass and you're interested in looking at it, but if you're going to use a repeat, make sure you reshape it as much as you can. Okay, right. So we are up for time. So I have mentioned my masterclasses a few times, shamelessly, I know. I do offer my Customer Obsession Leadership Principle Masterclass completely free. I promise I will not chase you up for upsell and further marketing. It's the most important leadership principle in the whole of Amazon. Everyone's going to have to be impressed by customer obsession. So I'm going to put my link here to my academy. Go pick up the masterclass for customer obsession. Completely free. I will not chase you. Hopefully you'll love it and you'll think it's great and you'll buy other content. If you don't, that's on me. Final thing I was going to say is, as I did mention, I am going to be donating 25% of my profits this week to the Disaster Emergency Committee. So it's just a crazy world out there. I'm horrified by what's going on in India. I know most of us here, certainly in the West and in the US, are seeing the other end of the pandemic. It's just dreadful what's going on. So that's what I'm doing. So if you are thinking about buying the masterclass, then please do buy it this week and I will make that donation on your behalf. Please be safe, everybody. Thank you very much for joining me today. Everyone, well done who got their jobs. I'm so excited for you, and for all of you with interviews and loops coming up, fingers crossed. Wish you the very, very best of luck. In the meantime, good luck. Stay safe.